Our universe is one big, giant mystery, and the things that we know of in this world only touch the surface. There is so much about this world and what lies beyond it that we have yet to grasp any sort of understanding of. What is out there? Are there aliens? If they are they the way that we perceive them to be? Reptilian, the Greys? And what about cryptids, Bigfoot, Mothman, the Loch Ness Monster? Are they all the same breed as aliens, angels, and ghosts? Maybe there is something on another level, another plane, another dimension that we don't yet understand. And maybe one day, those secrets will be revealed to us. And perhaps there are entities out there that are trying to help us understand all of the universe's mysteries.
Welcome to Down the Crooked Path. I'm your host, Amanda Joy. Join me as we dive into eerie and spine-chilling stories that blur the lines between reality and the unknown. From cryptids and mysterious disappearances to true crime, UFO sightings, and paranormal activity. Venture into the unknown and uncover the secrets that lie down the crooked path.
In 1987, Stephen King published a novel titled Tommyknockers. In this book, a woman digs up a buried ancient alien spaceship on her property, and it slowly starts to alter and telepathically control the people in the town. What people don't know is that Stephen King kind of borrowed these ideas from the children's rhyme and the name Tommyknocker that comes from old mining myths as the spooky motif for his stories. Mining is an old occupation. People have been working underground for centuries, and with that came a lot of superstitions. The idea of Tommyknockers or knackers originated in Cornish and Devon mining folklore. Knockers are described as small, gnome-like figures standing about 2 to 3 feet tall, with big heads, long arms, wrinkled skin, and white whiskers. They wear a tiny version of miners' clothing. One belief says that Tommyknockers were the souls of Jews who had crucified Christ. The Romans forced them to work in tin mines, and because of this, some miners say that Tommyknockers never make noise during Jewish festivals or on Saturdays, as it's the Sabbath and a day of rest. Other interpretations say that they are the spirits of miners who have died underground. Mostly, these creatures are tricksters. Did you leave your tools or lunch unattended? Well, they may steal and hide those. They pull pranks, blow out candles, mess with equipment. Mostly, they're harmless. In fact, it's said that they can sometimes actually be helpful, aiding miners in finding tin and ore, and also warning about dangers. They're called knockers because, well, they knock, usually to warn miners before a collapse or sometimes point towards ore. Now, most scientists will say that these noises are produced from shifting in the earth or creaking timber, but some miners do believe that Tommyknockers are guiding them to safety in the mines. Cornish miners came to western Pennsylvania in the 1820s, bringing with them the Tommyknocker stories. When the gold rush hit in California, mine owners wanted only experienced miners, and so the Cornish miners were recruited heavily, and because of this, the Tommyknocker belief spread through Colorado, Nevada, and California, and American miners adapted to the legends, which included leaving offerings for the knockers, which is usually food. Even when some mines closed down, there were families that still brought food as offerings to keep the creatures happy and friendly. And this was a belief that lasted well into the 1900s. In 1956, when a large mine closed and sealed its entrance near the Idaho Spring area, the miners actually petitioned the owners to unseal the mine and release the knockers so that they could move on. And the owners actually agreed. Today, modern internet folklore and paranormal circles have placed Tommyknockers alongside creatures like Mothman or the Flatwood Monster. Rather than ghosts or spirits, as some older traditions may suggest, they are viewed more as a subterranean humanoid. The combination of modernization and cultural blending has added new twists to the modern telling of Tommyknockers. These creatures can no longer stay confined to mines. They now are said to attach themselves to a person and follow them home, causing unexplained poltergeist-like activity. In 2012, Greg Newkirk and his wife Dana were deeply involved in the paranormal subculture as independent researchers, bloggers, and creators. Dana had become popular through her TV show, The Girly Ghost Hunter, that aired on Canadian Space Channel, which featured an all-female team that investigated haunted locations, using a more grounded and historical approach to ghost hunting. She is now a practicing witch, using tarot and neo-pagan practices in her research. As a teenager, Greg founded the Ohio Paranormal Investigation Network, and he spent his youth hanging out in local cemeteries, tracking down urban legends. He had a ghost hunting team known as the Ghost Hunters Incorporated, and in 2012, he had a digital publication called Week in Weird. It was a hub where they cataloged strange news, weird history, and paranormal investigations. They had also launched the Planet Weird Network, which was an umbrella network and production company designed to centralize their blog and documentation. Now, on April 22nd of 2012, Greg received an email from a man referring to himself as Dr. David Christie through the Ghost Hunters Incorporated website. The group had long since disbanded, and Greg had moved on to another paranormal endeavor. But he did occasionally check the server and the emails, even though the website hadn't been updated in years. Greg would hear from Dr. Christie on 4 occasions. The first email, Dr. Christie sounded terrified of these creatures he claimed were stalking and terrorizing his family. According to the emails, his house sits near the border of West Virginia and Kentucky in an area known as Hellier. The family had moved into the house a few months earlier, and everything seemed normal at first. But then the family of 3 started to hear weird noises at night around the outside of the house. Almost every night, his house was attacked by these small, goblin-like figures that were about the size of a small child, and he thinks they might be extraterrestrials of some sort. They have no facial features except for these large, black, oily eyes and lipless mouths. These things, whatever they are, keep looking in through his kid's window at night, trying to get inside the actual home. In the email, he is imploring Greg for his help, stating that he's tried to get the local police involved, but they just chalk it up to local wildlife. And he actually thinks that whatever these creatures are responsible for his missing dog. He thinks that maybe these creatures are coming from inside an abandoned mine in the woods behind his house. And even though he's armed, he's too afraid to check the mines to be certain. But he's hoping that Greg and his team would be able to help him, not just figure out where these creatures are actually coming from, but also to get rid of them. And he promises Greg full access to everything for filming in exchange, as long as the doctor can stay anonymous. And he promises that there is evidence that these creatures are real, not just some sort of local wildlife. Now, at first, Greg doesn't think too much of this. For one, the email went to his ghost hunting investigation website, and what this email is talking about certainly isn't any sort of spirit. All the same, Greg is a little curious about these emails. So he responds back to say that it doesn't sound like anything he's familiar with. He doesn't know anything about exploring mines or aliens or even how to safely seal a mine if this is where these creatures are coming from. But if this person can send him some sort of proof and send him some more details about what's happening, he could see what he could do to help this man. There's a part of him that thinks this is all just some sort of prank, but the following day, he receives another email from Dr. Christie, thanking him for responding and stating that he understands why Greg would be skeptical. In this email, he mentions that he received Greg's contact from a man named Terry Wrist. They had been given the contact information for another fringe investigator, but this person had retired and was no longer doing similar investigations. But this Terry gave him some contacts that he thought might be able to assist, and Greg was one of them. He goes on to explain that the area where he is living, Pike County, is very rural. A person can go days without seeing a neighbor. And he really started to notice these strange creatures in December. There are several of these beings. The dog, realizing that there's something around, would refuse to stay outside overnight and would bark herself raw and hoarse and faint until she was let back inside. One night, after hearing something outside, he went to investigate and discovered that his shed doors were open. He is certain that he closed them earlier that day. There are toys that are normally kept inside the shed that are now scattered around the yard. Some toys are even missing. Whoever did this, though, no one can be found anywhere. And this happens several times. He does report this to the local police, which is a very small unit, and they don't really seem too interested in what's happening. Nothing can be done about it. They can't be bothered with small plastic children's toys that are being stolen, if that's the case. In January, while sitting at the table for breakfast one morning, his 5-year-old daughter brings up these hairless kids that she keeps seeing. So his wife is like, what hairless children? And the daughter says that she watches them from her bedroom window. Saw them the night before, in fact. They were playing in the yard. She says that they're naked and they're bald, just like Grandpa. That very same day, Christie finds their door wreath stuffed purposely in the mailbox. So he decides to get some floodlights, and that seems to do the trick. No more weird stuff happens around the house. For a while, at least, because in February, Dr. Christie is woken to his daughter screaming in the middle of the night. He rushes to her room, but she's already out of her bedroom, fleeing down the hallway towards him, and she is petrified. Because not only are these hairless kids back, but they're trying to get into her room through the window. And when they couldn't get in, they just started tapping and knocking on the glass. She is so scared that she won't sleep in her room anymore. For weeks after this, every single night, there's something in his backyard. And every single morning, there's something moved or toys are missing, things are broken. There's evidence that something is going on in the yard. So again, Christie calls the police, and they finally send an officer to the home. He explains everything to the police, the stolen items, the thing that his daughter keeps seeing under the window. Even the dog is spooked. But the officer just kind of shrugs and says it's some animal living out in the woods. Nothing we can do about it. Try the gaming commissioner. Don't call us about this again. And then he leaves. So, of course, this does nothing to help. Things are still happening. Christie can even see smudge marks outside of his daughter's window, and there are now even tears in a screen door. On March 7th, it's around 1 a.m., and the dog is scratching at the back door, desperate to go out. Christie can see that the floodlights are on. He looks out the window in the kitchen, and the shed doors are still closed. Good sign. But then he notices the shadow of a person is being cast across the lawn, but it's too dark and he can't see who or what is making the shadow. The dog is going nuts now. He can hear something is going through a box on the porch, and Christie is now mad. He starts banging on the window as loudly as he can. He is yelling at this thing out on his lawn. And then he hears the back screen door swing open and slam loudly against the side of the house. And what's even more frightening, he can now hear what he described as a guttural chirping. He looks outside again, and now there's 2 more figures standing on his lawn, and then another. They are chirping and pointing at each other, and then he notices another figure standing in his flower bed just at the bottom of the window that he is looking out of. Just like his daughter said, it's about the size of a small child, maybe 4 feet tall at best, and completely hairless with pale skin. It's watching the other shadowed figures, and it hasn't noticed Christie yet. He can hear this creature chirping to the others, but its mouth isn't moving at all. It's more like the noises are coming out of its throat. After this, his dog goes missing, and Christie is convinced that the creatures are responsible for the dog's disappearance. He searches the forest area for his dog, and he finds several of the missing yard items and toys at the entrance of an old mine shaft, but he's too scared to go in by himself. Christie is so worried and knows that all of this sounds crazy to the average person. He has hardly said a word to anyone about this, not even his wife. He doesn't want her to worry as well. He's only told Greg and the friend who introduced him to Terry Rist. Dr. Christie finishes the email by saying he's willing to pay for Greg's travel fees, and Greg can have access to whatever it is that he needs for filming, research, investigation, and whatnot. He just wants these creatures gone, and for himself to remain anonymous. Problem is, Greg doesn't even know a Terry Rist. He's never heard of such a person. But now, Greg does travel a lot, and he meets a lot of people while he's recording and investigating paranormal events, so maybe it's possible this is a person he met briefly during one of his jobs. But he does a quick online search, and Greg finds Terry Rist. The thing is, Rist isn't someone's real name. Terry Rist is a pseudonym for a character in 2 books that were published by author and occultist Alan Greenfield, The Secret Cipher of the UFO Knots and The Secret Rituals of the Men in Black. Alan Greenfield has published what's supposed to be an interview he's held with a military member who uses the fake name Terry Wrist. This Terry person claims that they were part of a covert group of Vietnam War vets whose job it was to infiltrate and destroy an underground alien base hidden in the south of the United States. And where is this entrance hidden? In various caves and abandoned mines. Does that sound familiar? In the text, Wrist claims that the entities people think are aliens are actually ancient earthbound forces. He details fighting them using a mix of physical weapons and Western ceremonial magic, specifically referencing occultist Aleister Crowley's Star Sapphire ritual. Greg doesn't really know what to make of this discovery, but he still hasn't received any proof from Christie, so he emails back once again asking for some proof to back up the email's claims. Christie doesn't email back for a long time, so long that Greg starts to become convinced that this was just a huge hoax. When Christie does email back 3 later, he sends photographs. He explains that the activity around the home became so bad that the family decided to leave, but he and his brother-in-law had returned to check on the property and collect some personal items. He reports that the house seems just fine, almost like the creatures were only there before because his family was. But he was able to find a set of footprints that he believes are from these hairless child beings. They are leading into the woods behind the house to an area where a stream leads towards these mines that he believes the creatures are living in. His brother-in-law is a pretty experienced hunter, but he has no idea what animal made these tracks, and Christie hopes that maybe Greg knows someone who could help figure out these tracks. He mentions that he will be staying another 2 nights at the home and is hoping to send some more images if he finds anything else that he thinks Greg might be interested in. Along with these emails, Christie includes a few photographs of these strange footprints that have been left in the mud. These prints look to have 3 toes, so Greg emailed back and asked him to place something next to the footprints so he can properly gauge their size. Christie emails back with the images of the tracks with a yardstick next to it, and from this it's clear that the prints are about 3 to 4 inches long with no visible heel, and it definitely has 3 toes. Everyone who Greg sends these photos to can't really identify where the prints come from, but what is interesting was that they had dermal ridges, like fingerprints, which are remarkably hard to fake. And from these images, it's clear that this creature, whatever made it, was walking on tiptoes and stood completely upright on 2 feet. In his email, Christie remarks that the creatures have once again come out of the woods. His brother-in-law had up to this point been skeptical about the whole situation, but now he believes what's happening, and they're planning to leave before it gets dark. The footprints are also not the only photographs that Christie sends to Greg this email. There are some images of the creatures. One photo is pretty dark, and it's a little hard to make heads or tails of what you're actually looking at. It's more like a glare of a camouflage bouncing off of a glass window or a porch railing. But people swear that if you play around with the contrast and adjust the photo, you can make out a creature-like figure similar to what Christie had been describing. In a second photo, it looks like a tree line, and right at the edge of the darkness where the grass meets the wood, you can see a pale, indistinct shape. Some have said this looks like a humanoid figure creeping behind the trees. And the third, if you stare at the photo long enough, it looks like a pale curve of the bald head and large black eyes. If I'm being honest, from what I've seen of these photos, they don't really convince me that there's aliens or creatures out in this woods. Greg emails Christie to question the photos and their contents. He tries several times to contact Christie, but Greg never receives another email from Dr. David Christie again. Now, to many, this whole scenario sounds a lot like the case of the Kelly Hopkinville encounter, which happened in 1955, also in Kentucky. Now, to many people, this whole scenario sounds a lot like the case of the Kelly Hopkinville encounter, which happened also in Kentucky, but in 1955. A family of 11 people were attacked by several silver little humanoid figures that were impervious to bullets after a supposed UFO crash in the backwoods behind their home. The creatures terrorized the family that night, trying to get into the house through the windows and the screen doors. It was investigated by the USA's Project Blue Books, which ultimately labeled the event as a hoax. We actually covered this on the last episode of Down the Crooked Path, so check that out as well. Even still, Greg wasn't about to go quietly into the night on this case just because Dr. Christie wasn't communicating with him anymore. Because the footprints seemed to be authentic, that was enough to encourage him to push forward. In several of these emails, Christie had mentioned making police reports, so Greg contacted the police department in Hellier, which was smaller and didn't really have any information. So next, Greg tried the nearest police station, and they were able to confirm that yes, they had gotten calls that sounded a lot like what Greg and the emails mentioned, but they weren't able to give him any further details other than the confirmation, no address, no name of the person who reported these. Okay, so reports were actually made. That's a good sign that these emails aren't a hoax. Greg then tries to track down Dr. David Christie. Maybe he can get in touch with him some other way. So he looks into the local records, but they don't really exist in a town that's that small. They don't do censuses. Greg does some research and discovers that yes, there are abandoned mines in the area. All of Hellier is basically an underground labyrinth of unstable mine shafts that have been long abandoned. And in almost every backyard, there are wooded areas and streams, so nothing to really give him an address to look at either. The emails never mention a description of the outside of the house beyond that, not even so much as the color of the house. Even while everything Greg had to go on didn't seem like it was a hoax to him, he didn't really have anywhere to go with this information. Without an address and no way to contact Dr. David Christie, he was just in limbo. So from here, he just kind of moves on with his life. He did have his film company, Planet Weird, and so for the next half a year, he and his wife focused on filming, and during one investigation in connection with the documentary, they were visiting Blue Mountain in North Carolina. Now, this area is known as a high strangeness area. People have been reporting glowing multicolored lights floating around the Blue Ridge Escarpment for over a century. Lore states that these lights are ghost lanterns searching for lost loved ones or spirits from an ancient battle. While they're in the Brown Mountains, one of their friends happens to mention that he knows of a nearby cave, and it's supposedly the entrance to an underground alien base. He can take them there. So Greg and Dana are like, yeah, sure, let's go. This could be kind of cool. The friend takes them to this area, but instead of finding an entrance to a cave or any sort of passageway, they find this massive boulder, and it's blocking the way of where their friend claims the entrance is. It's almost like the boulder isn't supposed to be there, but there's no way for them to move it or access the passage, so they turn back. Now, this trip has nothing to do with Dr. David Christie and the little hairless creatures, but trust me, this will come into play soon. About 5 months later, Greg gets a new email. This one isn't from Dr. David Christie, though. It's from Terry Wrist. And all it has to say is, "Why did you stop when you were so close? I have something for you. 1 week." And sure enough, 1 week later, he receives another email from Terry Wrist. This one says that Hellier is just the symptom, that every door closes, a window is open. The door is closed, but the window is open. Use the numbers. And it includes 16 numbers. At first, Greg and the team can't figure out what the numbers mean when they suddenly realize that they must be GPS coordinations. So they enter the numbers into Google Maps, and the screen brings up the exact spot that they had been when they visited Brown Mountains. The one that their friend had taken them to, where the supposed alien entrance was. Okay, so you gotta remember here, Greg did a lot of online work when it came to the paranormal. He even had a blog site, weekofweird.com. So of course, aside from some personal redactions, he had posted on the blog about the emails from Dr. Christie. So it wasn't as if the name Terry Wrist just came from anywhere. But what Greg didn't mention was the name of the town. Nowhere did he say it was Hellier. Only a very small handful of people knew that detail. Furthermore, even a smaller handful of people knew about the search for the cave entrance. So while yes, it's possible that the emails sent from Christie and Terry are the same person, there's no way for that person to have known about the precise location in the Brown Mountains. Thinking back to the Kelly Hopkinville case, Greg understands that there are some very clear similarities between that event and what is described in his emails. Both are in the Kentucky woods area. Both describe the same sort of beings with the same behavior. And while most people think that this is just some sort of joke or hoax, Greg is now starting to think that these creatures Dr. Christie is being harassed by might be the same creatures from the 1955 encounter. If these creatures are the same, what does seem out of place is the huge gap in the sightings, one from 1955 and one in 2012. The only thing is, there have been other sightings, a lot in fact, to the point where people in the area have lore about little white men who live in the woods. There is one more story that came out of eastern Kentucky in 1990. A teenage boy of 14 years old named Donald Patton lived in the rural area, and behind his house there was a hill that he and his cousin Eric would often play on and throw rocks down. One night he was up there alone. His father opened the door and shouted for the boys to come down for dinner. Even though Donald was by himself, Donald heads down towards the house, but his dad shouts for Eric to come too. When Donald gets to the door, he tells his dad he was by himself. Why did he call for Eric? His dad is now confused. There were two kids dressed in white standing so close behind Donald that they were looking right down the collar of his shirt. If Eric wasn't there, who was? Several years later, Greg wants to shift away from the sensationalized and cliched mainstream paranormal television. He wants to show people something different than jump scares in cases where every location is disturbed by a dark spirit or demon. He wants to show the real research that he, his wife, and his team put into each and every case they work, moving his work towards more real-time mysteries, focusing on locations and events that are surrounded by high strangeness. Think places like Mount Shasta. That area is surrounded by ghost stories, UFOs, lost civilizations, and even stories about Bigfoot. Carl Pfeiffer and his investigative partner, Connor Randall, are experienced paranormal filmmakers. They're known for creating the web series Spirits of the Stanley, as well as working on Ghost Hunters Academy. Like Greg, he too was growing sick of the hokey, Hollywood-stylized way of filming ghost hunting and paranormal shows. He would rather make something focused on the more psychological exploration and basically reinvent how paranormal television was made. Working in the same industry meant that Pfeiffer and his team had crossed paths with the Newkirks and their team a few times. So when the Newkirks wanted to reopen the Kentucky Goblin case and re-examine the Dr. David Christie emails, they reached out to invite Pfeiffer and Randall to document the journey. And with that, the Hellier Internet series was created. Currently, there are 2 seasons available, and a 3rd is in production. One thing that the show explores is the secret cipher of the UFOnauts. Remember the book by Alan Greenfield, where the name Terry Wrist came from? In the book, Greenfield argues that aliens, UFOs, and most cryptids are ultra-terrestrial beings. You know, those interdimensional entities that magicians and occultists have been communicating with for centuries? Because Greenfield was an occultist as well as an author, the book relies heavily on the New Aeon English Kabbalah, which is an English number system assigning numerical value to the alphabet and is connected to the numerical riddles that were left in the infamous occultist Aleister Crowley's book, The Book of Law. Now, this does seem a little bit out there, but we all know that there are people out there who claim to have made contact with alien beings. And some of these people have said that the aliens have told them their names or the names of planets that they have come from. And usually they sound a lot like some sort of made-up sci-fi gibberish. So Greenfield took those names and used the code or cipher on these names, and they matched with several numbers used in ancient magical books and secret societies, like the Victorian Golden Dawn or Aleister Crowley's OTO. Essentially, Greenfield realized that aliens were giving contactees a cosmic secret handshake. They weren't from outer space. They were the same ancient spirit secret societies have been summoning for centuries, just wearing new modern spacesuits. Greg, knowing that Terry Wrist reference, took the cipher and plugged in the word Hellier, and it gave them the number of 93. And the secret book of Aleister Crowley, 93 is the most sacred number in existence, representing divine will and love. And sudden, the Hellier team realized that they weren't dealing with a simple monster hunt. The anonymous emails weren't just a hoax or a cry for help. They were a coded invitation Whoever or whatever sent those emails was using Greenfield's exact secret handshake to lure the team into the woods of Kentucky, forcing them onto a path of a modern-day magical initiation, or so they think. By this point, they had all come to understand that Dr. David Christie was a pseudonym. The whole team has agreed this is not a real person. For one, a doctor in such a small area would have made some waves, and yet no one in the area even knew anybody by that name who lived in or around the town of Hellier. The team's general consensus was that Dr. David Christie wasn't real, and if he wasn't, could this person be the same person who tried to contact Grays as Terry Wrist? They hadn't ruled that out yet, but they had also established that Alan Greenfield wasn't the person behind the emails either. Since Hellier decodes to the number 93, and the team wants to try to communicate with whoever is sending the emails, they try a different route. As everything was tying back to the occult and certain beliefs about higher dimensional beings, the team decided to perform an occult ritual dedicated to the energy of the number 23 as a sort of way to signal the sender of the emails. They used a ritual of Aleister Crowley's called the Star Sapphire, designed to align the human mind with these higher beings. The team was basically trying to get a message out there that we understand your code and we're ready to talk. They actually tried to contact the email writer through different occult-based rituals, not just this one of which was inside the cave trying to contact Pan, the Greek god of nature, as goblins, as these emails refer to them as, are supposed to be servants of Pan. So, did it work? Did casting ancient spells in the dark actually achieve anything? Well, kinda, to the team anyway. They started to experience what they thought were synchronicities. Throughout the investigation, the team kept finding specific, reoccurring physical items in the middle of nowhere. The most famous examples from the show were a shiny metallic blue balloons that were caught in the tree, deep in the middle of the wilderness, and a single blue bead buried in the dirt. Now, finding a blue balloon in the woods is normal. Finding the exact same color balloon multiple times at the exact coordinations generated by an occult cipher seems statistically impossible. It was almost like the objects acted like a physical checkbox from the entities, as if to say, you're on the right path, keep walking. Whenever the investigation hit a dead end, the universe would literally throw a person at them. They would walk into a random diner or a local library, and the person sitting next to them would happen to be a relative of someone mentioned in the emails, or an occultist who possessed the exact missing piece of the puzzle. Seems too good to be true if you ask me. This all kind of made sense to the investigators, though. It led them back to Greenfield's ultimate conclusion. The team wasn't just investigating a mystery. They weren't just searching for cryptids or aliens in the woods. They were caught inside a living matrix. The invisible intelligence behind the email was manipulating the physical moment of real people to guide the investigators towards their destination. Okay, I know what you're thinking. This sounds really out there, and that's sort of where the huge divide in this case happens. On one hand, you have the skeptical and rational explanations. It is entirely possible that what we're seeing in the show is the human mind doing what it does best, looking for and finding patterns where they don't actually exist. Think about it. This team was deeply immersed in their mystery for years. They had all read Alan Greenfield's book. They had all studied Aleister Crowley's math, and they knew every single detail of the Dr. Christie emails. When you spend that much time hyper-focused on a subject, your brain kind of becomes a sponge for it. It's called eidomotor phenomenon, and it mixes with just pure coincidences. If you look hard enough at the number 93, you'll start to see it everywhere. Under this lens, the team isn't talking to aliens. They're just talking to their own subconscious minds and creating this beautifully orchestrated psychological performance. But then there's the other side. There are some things that are a little harder to explain. How do you explain a non-existent Dr. Christie knowing that sending a string of emails about goblins to a random team of researchers would perfectly trigger a mathematical chain reaction that lines up with a century-old secret society? If this is real and Greenfield's theory is correct, the universe isn't a collection of random coincidences. It's a living, breathing matrix controlled by a higher consciousness. The rituals in the show work because they are a technology, a way to tune the human brain into different frequencies. The team didn't stumble upon a hoax. They were selected, reeled in by a coded email, and used as tools to bridge the gap between our world and something ancient waiting in the dark. I mean, of course, there's the possibility that this is just a performance. I mean, they are filmmakers at the end of the day, and while they claim to want to stay away from the hokey Hollywood way of filming the paranormal, they still need to do something to keep viewers watching. This could all be a way to make things interesting. So far, 2 seasons into the show, they haven't found a goblin or an alien, but that's sort of their point. They want to show the research and the actual investigation. But how do you make that interesting enough to make people want to watch? Maybe this is how. Let's pretend this is real. And if it is, then who is Dr. David Christie? Most fans, researchers, and even occultists think that the emails were sent by another occultist who wanted to see if they could, maybe trick paranormal investigators into going on a wild goose chase. They think that the emails sent from Christie and the ones sent from Rist are sent by the same person, Terry Rist being the key name to send them down the Greenfield cipher rabbit hole. And if this is the case, then it worked. But there are those who are believers in Greenfield's ideas and Crowley's. They think that perhaps Dr. David Christie is something to the effect of like a mask worn by an ultra-terrestrial intelligence or a spirit or a higher dimensional being. Basically, an invisible entity generated a fake person and a fake story about goblins to send these people on a quest. The emails were the handshake, and when the team realized Dr. David Christie was a phantom, they decided to stop looking for a physical man and start looking at the math. They plugged that fake name into Alan Greenfield's cipher, and the name scored a value of 196. When you look at the secret occult texts that share the same numbers, the cipher reveals phrases like "go to the holer" and "fairy of the stars." But the most shocking phrase tied to the number 196, "my name, hidden, end," which confirmed to the team that it's not a real name, it's a pseudonym. And the fairy of the stars also is an interesting one. Now, fairies are not those cute winged Disney-like Tinkerbells. They're actually terrifying ancient beings. Some folklorists think that they are able to adapt to modern world, and space and UFOs entered mainstream society. Fairies took on a new identity. Aliens. So fairies and aliens are one and the same, which in that context, those emails would make perfect sense as they refer to these alien creatures as goblins. To researchers and the team, this is just further proof of Godfield's theories that these beings aren't really from outer space, they are interdimensional fey creatures. But if you're looking for a more grounded answer as to who Dr. Christie is, well, some people think that he is a real person just using a fake name. I mean, the whole story sounds a little far-fetched from the jump. But if this was really happening to you, imagine what people would think if you went around telling them that your family home was being assaulted by tiny little alien men that lived in the woods. In the email, this Dr. Christie does ask to stay anonymous, so maybe this fake name is just an added layer of identity protection. Okay, but what about the goblins themselves? Well, there's a third theory that kind of flips the entire investigation on its head, and it comes from the deeply unnerving concept in chaos magic known as egregore. An egregore is an independent, non-physical entity that is born purely out of human thought. Occultists believe that if enough people focus their minds, fears, and beliefs on a specific image or symbol or creature, that it can actually come alive and become a conscious ghost, a thought form made real. What if there was never any goblins in Kentucky? What if Dr. David Christie never existed because he was never human? The entity didn't lure the team to Kentucky because it wanted to be caught. What if it lured them there because it wanted to exist? The synchronicities, the blue balloons, the footsteps in the dark, the emails, they weren't clues left by a monster. They were the first desperate grasps of a brand new entity breaking through the fabric of imagination and stepping directly into our reality. Because after all, for decades, all around the world, people have been talking about aliens, goblins, and fae in some way, shape, or form. There are some who believe that the creepypasta Slender Man is one of these creatures, brought to life from the collective minds on the internet. Think about the internet as the ultimate amplifier in this mystery. It acts like the nervous system that allows the local Kentucky myth to morph into a living paranormal force. It almost makes sense. The internet allows more minds to tap into and share ideas. Most of Greg's work can be found on the internet. Emails are sent through the internet. The show Hellier is an internet show. The more it's talked about, the stronger the entity gets. So, in a sense, this podcast episode and you listening to it are contributing to its growth and strength. In the end, we are left standing exactly where the Hellier team stood, staring directly into a pitch-black mouth of Kentucky cave, wondering what is actually looking back at us. Because when you strip away the math and the ciphers and the digital static, what you're left with are three distinct paths. Maybe this is the beginning of a genuine cosmic shift. Maybe Alan Greenfield is right, and these elusive, invisible intelligences are using the modern tools of our world to gently guide us towards a deeper understanding of reality, magic, and our true place in the universe. Or maybe we have to look at the screen in front of us and face the cynical truth of the digital age. Maybe this entire web of goblins and codes is just a brilliantly orchestrated gimmick, a masterpiece of a psychological storytelling designed purely to harvest our attention, generate clicks, and chase the views in a world that thrives on a viral mystery. But there's a third option, and it's one that's far more unsettling. Maybe the universe will never tell us the whole story. Maybe the unknown is just meant to stay unknown. Perhaps the entities, the emails, the synchronicities are just a cosmic mirror, reflecting what we choose to believe, while the absolute truth remains forever buried deep within the dark, winding tunnels of the Appalachian Mountains. We may never get our definitive answer, but the next time you receive a strange message, find an object out of place, or feel a sudden chill in the room, just remember, the game is always playing, and you might have just joined the board. Check your junk email, don't whistle at night, and may the mysteries always guide you. This is Amanda Joy, signing off. Follow the path further. If this episode left you lingering in the shadows, there's more to explore. Follow at Down the Crooked Path on TikTok and Instagram for haunting visuals, behind-the-scenes lore, and updates on upcoming episodes. Every post is another breadcrumb deeper into the strange, the forgotten, and the beautifully unsettling. Stay curious and keep walking.